Small world, the world of informative flashcards. Flashcards in Purposive Communication Part 1. Course description of subject, Purposive Communication. Purposive Communication is a 3-unit course that develops students' communicative competence and enhances their cultural and intercultural awareness through multimodal tasks that provide them opportunities for communicating effectively and appropriately to a multicultural audience in a local or global context. Purposive communication is simply writing, speaking, presenting to different audience and for varied purposes. Communication defined. Communication is process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. Communication is the act of giving, receiving, and sharing information. Types of communication. 1. Verbal communication. 2. Nonverbal communication. 3. Written communication. 4. Oral communication. 5. Active listening. 6. Visual communication. Nature of verbal and nonverbal communication. Verbal communication refers to our use of words, while nonverbal communication refers to communication that occurs through means other than words, such as body language, gestures, and silence. Verbal communication is an agreed-upon and rule-governed system of symbols used to share meaning. Elements of verbal communication. 1. The sender. 2. The receiver. 3. The message. 4. The medium and internal and external static. A glitch in any of these areas can deform the message and distort its meaning. Ethical communication defined. Ethical communication refers to communication in a manner that is clear, concise, truthful, and responsible. Principles of ethical communication. 1. Truthfulness and honesty is the most core principle of ethical communication. 2. Be truthful and honest. 3. Active listening. 4. Speak non-judgmentally. 5. Speak from your own experience. 6. Consider the receiver's preferred communication channel. 7. Strive to understand. 8. Avoid a negative tone. 9. Do not interrupt others. Be truthful and honest, principle of ethical communication. Being honest means communicating what is known to be true, only 100% the facts, to a listener, with no intent to deceive or present only parts of the truth. It also means being as objective as possible, that is, not tailoring the story based on what the speaker wants the listener to believe. Letting the listener take the data that is objectively presented and believe what they choose to believe is a core goal of ethical communication. Ethical communication should be based on accurate information and facts. In a word, do not lie. Active listening, principle of ethical communication. Hearing someone and listening to them are two different things. In order for ethical communication to be effective, it is necessary for the recipient to proactively listen to the speaker, and to not just hear what they want to hear, or to hear only parts of the conversation. This also means asking questions when any point is not completely understood, for the sake of clarification. Speak non-judgmentally, principle of ethical communication. Ethically and concisely communicating means speaking in a non-judgmental manner with every recipient, negating unnecessary conflict, which typically creates a breakdown in communication and causes misunderstandings. Unnecessary conflict is never good for any business, and such conflicts usually result from unethical communications, with judgmental, accusatory, and overly critical comments often being the catalyst for such breakdowns in communication. Speak from your own experience, principle of ethical communication. Bringing your personal experience into a dialogue with business listeners is important, providing backup for your arguments with something more tangible. Such a communication method, experiential communication, paints a complete picture for your audience and helps to prove your points so that the listeners have a better understanding of what is being said. Consider the receiver's preferred communication channel, principle of ethical communication. You risk losing an audience if you use a communication channel that is not preferred by your intended receiver. To effectively communicate with your listeners, use the most preferred communication channel, whether that be face-to-face, email, conference call, phone call, messenger app, etc. Also, when presenting data to a business audience, be aware of the preferred method of presentation for that business, whether it be graphs, slides, PowerPoint presentations, etc. Additionally, since body language is very important, it is often preferred to meet business clients face-to-face. Strive to understand, principle of ethical communication. While it is important to be proactive in listening, it is important for listeners to also strive to fully understand what is being said before responding. While asking for clarification or confirmation of a point is fine, many times questions that listeners pose have already been answered. Listeners should think about what has been said before constructing a reply. Reading in between the lines is also an important skill that allows for understanding what isn't said but was implicitly said or implied. Meaning of the phrase, reading in between the lines. It is an idiom which means to find meanings that are intended but that are not directly expressed in something said or written. For example, she said she could afford it, but reading between the lines, I don't think she has enough money. Avoid a negative tone, principle of ethical communication. Ethically communicating assumes the speaker will avoid rudeness, be polite and professional, and have tact. The ethical communicator knows that it's not only important what you say, but how you say it. Tone is one of the most critical facets of communication. A listener may miss the meaning altogether if the tone is wrong, which can lead to unnecessary confrontations that decrease business productivity. Controlling one's tone goes along with self-control, a soft skill that allows one to know how they wish to reply to a terse business message, for instance, versus the most effective manner for replying. Essentially, keeping the tone positive or neutral is best, as the tone of a written message, or of one's voice, is always picked up by the receiver, and can alter how the message is received and/or understood. Do not interrupt others. Principle of ethical communication. Allowing others to speak is important for the creation of a civil, effective working environment. Interrupting others results in misunderstandings and unnecessary conflicts and a breakdown in workplace communications, which only hinders corporate progress and creates problems. Interrupting others not only shows a lack of respect, but does not allow the listener to fully grasp what is being said, which often results in incorrect assumptions being made. Respect privacy and confidentiality. Principle of ethical communication. Most businesses should include a clause in their code of ethics defining what is appropriate when it comes to honoring client and employee confidentiality and privacy. This can have a wide range of implications, including minimizing workplace gossip and mitigating toxic conversations about the private lives of clients and/or personnel. Accept responsibility. Principle of ethical communication. As noted before, a core tenet within any ethical communication framework is taking responsibility for the actions that result from one's words, whether it be good or bad. This includes both short-term and long-term consequences of one's communications. Owning one's words reinforces the importance of being conscientious about ethical communication. Meaning or difference between local and global communication. Local is delineated by social integration, i.e., face-to-face interaction or interaction between individuals physically co-present. Global is a function of system integration or interaction between individuals away from each other in time or space or both. Local and global communication in multicultural or intercultural settings. Interracial communication, communication with people in different races. Interethnic communication, interacting with people of different ethnic origin. International communication, communicating between representatives from different nations. Intercultural communication, interacting with members of the same racial or ethnic group. Five types of communication styles. Assertive communication style. Aggressive communication style. Passive communication style. Passive-aggressive communication style. Manipulative communication style. Assertive communication style. This is considered to be the most effective communication style. A person using this style is confident in their convictions, but makes sure that they do not belittle or steamroll others in the conversation. They do not resort to manipulation or pushing limits, Rather, they seek compromise and consensus through active listening and clearly expressing their wants or needs. Assertive communicators tend to have naturally high self-esteem, and they do not veer into passive or aggressive communication. A hallmark of assertive communication is the use of I statements, such as "I feel as though you are interrupting me during the client meeting undermined my expertise," rather than "you need to be quiet during client meetings since you insist on interrupting constantly." Aggressive communication style. This communication style can be hostile, threatening, and comes from a place of wanting to win at all costs. An aggressive communicator behaves as if their contribution to the conversation is more important than anyone else, and the content of their message is often lost because of the tone of their delivery. This type of communication can result in people feeling belittled, steamrolled, and intimidated. In some cases, they may reactively push back at an aggressive communicator, not because the communicator is incorrect, but simply because the delivery of the message is so unpleasant that they instinctively disagree. This type of communication has been observed in some business leaders, who can control their style enough to come across as bold, rather than domineering, but that takes skill. Passive communication style. This type of communication is also known as the submissive communication style. Another way of describing it is the people-pleaser type. This type of communication is self-effacing, conflict-avoidant, and easygoing. That's not to say that a passive communicator is always happy. In fact, this style of communication can lead to resentment building up over time because the person is unable to clearly communicate their opinions, needs, and wants. Passive communicators tend to step back and let other, more assertive or aggressive, people lead the way. They can find it difficult to effectively express themselves, and want to avoid confrontation at all costs. This can directly lead to their good ideas never being heard, or for miscommunications to come up. Passive-aggressive communication style. This style of communication, like the name suggests, combines aspects of both passive and aggressive communication styles. The passive exists on the surface, while the aggressive simmers beneath. Outwardly, the communicator seems sweet and easygoing, but they are operating from a place of anger and resentment. This bubbles up and can be shown through using sarcasm, being patronizing, starting rumors, or gossiping. Their frustration comes out through these indirect routes, but they will have the same effect as someone who is straightforwardly aggressive. Colleagues will not want to work with them. This style tends to be very toxic in the workplace, spreading discontent and resentment throughout the team or department. Manipulative communication style. This style of communication uses cunning, deceit, and influence to control the outcome of the conversation, and thus the actions of the people around them. Manipulative communicators rarely say what they mean. Instead, they will bury their real goals within layers of obfuscation to get their way without the other person even realizing it. This style is often characterized as insincere and patronizing, and when people realize that they have been played by a manipulator, they will not respond well to that person in future communications. While some manipulation could come in useful in a customer-facing role where there is a need to calm down an irritated client, this style will lead to some clashes within teams or departments if one employee is using it consistently. Where possible, a manipulative communicator should be steered into assertive communication. Manipulator knows what they want to achieve and has clear goals, they are just not taking the best path to get there. By prioritizing everyone's needs, not just their own, they could achieve better results without upsetting colleagues. How your communication type can affect your message. Analytical communication. Intuitive communication. Functional communication. Personal communication. Analytical communicator. An analytical communicator favors data and hard numbers. They want quantifiable information and disregard emotional statements as too vague or unimportant. When communicating with this type of person, do your research first. Lay out the numbers, then follow up with your request. The upside of this is that an analytical communicator is good at looking at issues logically. There won't be any problems with emotions getting in their way. If an analytical communicator is not performing well, you could bring them the numbers that show where they are lacking, and they will accept that they need to improve in those areas. The downside is that they can be perceived as cold or emotionless. They may make colleagues feel uncomfortable, or dismiss those who do not communicate in the same way. This can cause some issues within teams who have disparate styles of communication, such as personal communicators. They also might take too much time analyzing, calculating, and checking details, leading to a slow response time to issues, and resulting in lost opportunities. Intuitive communicator. An intuitive communicator is all about the big picture. This is the type of person who doesn't like getting bogged down into the nitty-gritty details of a project. They prefer to get the general overview. They are quick to see the broad picture and can easily leap to the conclusion, sometimes offering great insights as to how best to complete a project. When you communicate with this type of person, give the Cliff's Notes version. This new marketing project is going to use a new algorithm to target potential customers with even more precision. Rather than first, we are going to A/B test the new algorithm. Next, we are going to develop 3 levels of tailored content. Then we are going to deploy the project. Then we are going to use these metrics to measure our success. The upside is that this type of communicator understands ideas quickly and is already proposing solutions to possible challenges. They don't need to have their hand held, they are already off and running. They can often come up with out-of-the-box ideas and enjoy challenging themselves and others. The downside is that this impatience can lead to mistakes. Intuitive communicators hate having to sit through the boring details, but by skipping that, they risk missing crucial information. They also will chafe at communicators who need to explain ideas or projects step by step, like functional communicators. What is a Cliff's Notes version? Why is it called Cliff Notes? Cliff's Notes version is a series of pamphlets with summaries and basic analyses of works of literature, intended as study aids. Why is it called Cliff Notes? Because it derived from Cliff's Notes, a series of literature study guides published by Clifton Hillegas. Functional Communicator. The functional communicator lives on the other side of the spectrum from the intuitive communicator. They prefer to walk through the steps of the process, outlining each one until they reach the conclusion and can tie it all up in one neat package. They are detail-oriented, good at understanding which processes will be the most helpful to ensure success, and they can be trusted to create functional timelines, allocate tasks, and run projects. When speaking with a functional communicator, make sure that you are prepared. They will want to know the full details of the project. You don't want to get caught up with metrics, feelings, or big picture thinking. You must instead come with the project laid out and ready to inspect. Personal communicator. The personal communicator is opposite to the analytical communicator on this spectrum of communication styles. They prefer to use emotional language and value the human connection, seeking to know how their colleagues are feeling as well as what they are thinking. This type of communicator tends to be a diplomat, helping solve conflicts and seeking peaceful solutions to inter- and interdepartmental issues. For this type of communicator, you want to lean into the emotional component. Something like, "Do you feel like our customer success team is feeling burned out recently? Their numbers have dropped. Please explore this further and see if they are feeling like they need more support. Will net you much more success than our customer satisfaction scores have dropped 11% this year and we are not in line to meet our targets. We need to find and fix that problem, bringing the scores back up this quarter." The upside to this style is that a personal communicator will effortlessly build deep bonds within their team. They are focused on building cohesion and often will step into a problem-solving role when others are having difficulty in their communication. The downside to this style of communication is that it might become too emotional for other communicators. Analytical communicators especially will not appreciate this approach, and may well disregard what personal communicators say, which can lead to hurt feelings or resentment.